Hey y'all, and welcome back to Bourbon and Bones. This is our 14th episode. And if you're new to our channel, welcome. Like, share, comment, and subscribe below. So tonight we're going to talk about perhaps the most searched for bottle in America, made by one of the most renowned master distillers of all time and named for the man that kept arguably the most popular distillery alive. And that is Blanton's, the first single barrel bourbon. This bottle is stunning. The shape, it's shaped like a barrel. Every label is handwritten with the date, the dump date, the barrel number, the proof point, and most importantly, which rick house it was in and which rick it was on. So Blanton's first came to the market in 1984, and that was still when Buffalo Trace was actually the Stag Distillery. And it was made by Elmer T. Lee. In the final years of Mr. Lee's career, he was tasked by making an exceptionally high quality bourbon. Mr. Lee took some time and looked back into his early career and to his mentor, Colonel Albert Bacon Blanton. Now, Colonel Blanton was born near the distillery in 1881, and in 1897, at 16 years of age, he began working at the distillery. And by 1921, he had held every job in the distillery and was at that point the manager. So by 1921, he was in charge of all the operations, and Colonel Blanton was a very savvy businessman and kept the distillery open through Prohibition by making medicines for the public. And in 1933, the Volstead Act was repealed, but if you remember your American history, it was mired in the depths of the Depression. And he actually slowly started to build a brand name for the distillery. So in 1937, the distillery was flooded by the Kentucky River, and within 24 hours after the waters receded, Colonel Blanton had jumped in with his crew, cleaned the mess up, and got the distillery back to producing bourbon. And then during World War II, the distillery stopped producing bourbon and actually started producing high-grain alcohol for the military. And through all of these challenges, his main focus was keeping the distillery open, producing high-quality bourbon, and having jobs for the local community. So during the 1940s as well was actually when he received his Kentucky colonelship from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and is the highest honor that the Commonwealth can bestow upon its citizens. So arguably one of the most important additions to the distillery during this time period was Warehouse H. So in 1933, as we mentioned, the demand for bourbon was booming, even during the Depression. Colonel Blanton built a brand new warehouse, and to do it quickly and cheaply, he actually made it out of metal. So come to find out, the very thin walls of the rick house more mimicked the fickle weather of Kentucky. Most houses at that time were made of stone or wood, and they actually had almost a natural insulation, so it took a long time for the temperature to raise and lower in the Kentucky weather. But with thin sheet metal, it happened very, very quickly. And this is the only rick house in the world that actually has steam heat. And this is actually to prevent the water inside the barrels from freezing and actually splitting the barrels, because that is an issue when you don't have any insulation in your walls. Your pipes will freeze and burst. Your barrels will freeze and burst. So with the new rick house built, Colonel Blanton began to see that the barrels coming from this house were really something special, and something he actually called honey barrels, because they were the choice barrels. So he actually would pull those out for visiting dignitaries, for heads of state that came. If you don't know, actually Stag Distillery, Buffalo Trace, is in Frankfort, Kentucky, which is the capital of the Commonwealth. And so visiting dignitaries would come, and he would host and have these really special barrels set aside just for them. So as Elmer T. Lee thought about all of this, he decided that this new whiskey needed to come from Warehouse H and needed to be named for his mentor. On the normal market today, there is just Blanton single barrel. However, since Sazerac is owned by Takara Shuzo Company, it's really the very first time where a ownership plays an important role in a local distillery, because most bourbon distillers are owned by someone else, and oftentimes by a much larger conglomerate. But it really doesn't affect production at all, except for right now, because bourbon has been very, very popular in Japan for a long time, and they have Blanton's Special Reserve and Gold and Straight from the Barrel, which in the United States are very, very rare. Now, the demand for those specialty bottles is very high right now, and that is slowly shifting to the U.S. market as well, but it's a very slow shift because the Japanese really don't want to give up their exclusive access, and I don't blame them for that one bit. So like we said before, this bottle is stunning. The horse stopper here that I have is the letter O, which makes it the 6th letter in the collection. So when you have all the letters lined up, it will spell out Blanton's, and it is the representation of the Kentucky Derby, or a horse race in general, from starting post all the way through the finish line. The bottle itself is shaped like a barrel, and the label here says this was dumped on March 13th of 2020, barrel number 865, stored in warehouse H in Rick number 51, and individually selected, filtered, and bottled by hand at 93 proof. All of this is written by hand every single day, which kind of gives it a real personal characteristic to them. Because as you slowly collect more and more bottles, you'll notice that the handwriting changes often because it's different people every day. So without further history, let's dig into the bourbon. So right away you get brown caramel, vanilla, a citrus note, just a little splash of it, and a little bit of spice. Not a whole lot, but a little bit of like a cinnamon, like a candied cinnamon lemon or something, a bit of something like that, and maybe even a little bit of mint or spearmint. So on the palate, it's very much that sweet corn that you get a lot from Buffalo Trace products. But it's always pleasant. You always love that flavor. So you have sweet corn, you have a nice light caramel, you get kind of a raisiny-ishness right on the back end. Some kind of and as it finishes, it actually brings in a little bit of spice, kind of almost as like an afterthought, but it really balances the sweet front end with a nice spicy back end. So it really kind of gives it a lot more complexity than just a sweet bourbon. So as always, we are going to take a quick little break, transition real fast, and we'll add some water and see what happens. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to Bourbon and Bones. So we are digging in with some water this time, so let's begin. So on the nose right away, you actually get a lot more of that citrus, a lot more vanilla. Some of the caramel kind of pulls back a bit, and the spice kind of it's there right at the very end, like the last half second that you're smelling, it just kind of drifts through. So with a bit of water, you still get those caramels. You still get a little bit of citrus. You still get almost more of an apple than raisin before. And it still has a good strong spice at the end that kind of finishes, but it's actually a little bit more baking spice, more cinnamon, and less oaky black pepperness. Kind of really builds in, and the finish is actually really nice, like dark caramels and a little bit of vanilla, but mainly just like this nice heavy dark caramel that kind of lingers there. Yeah, definitely apple. Yeah, a lot. I like that. I like that shift from kind of a dried raisiny to a bright Granny Smith apple. Yeah, pleasant finish, but lasts a bit longer, I feel like, than most bourbons in its proof range. So I've been delaying on doing this bottle for a while. It seems to me that within the bourbon world, Blanton's is kind of this extreme point. Some people think it's the best bourbon ever made by man, and the other end hates it, just vehemently hates it. And I kind of understand where both are coming from. This bourbon is highly sought after and highly overpriced. I mean, you will find a bottle like this, I believe I paid around $65 for this. You will find this easily $200, $300, $400, $500 for a single bottle of Blanton's. That is ridiculous. Is it a good bourbon? Absolutely. Is it $500 good? By no means is it. People are taking advantage of a hype. People come in all the time saying, hey, I've been trying to find Blanton's. I've been trying for 2 years, 3 years to find this bottle, and I can't get my hands on it. I can only ever find it online for hundreds of dollars, and it's just not worth it. Is it great? Yes. This is probably, for me, probably the very first high-end bourbon I probably ever had. And I have great memories of it. I have great memories of it being on the shelf and people collecting the horses. It's a good bottle of bourbon. I will say this, for me personally, it's a little low proof anymore. I have been drinking bourbon for a very, very long time now, and I find it to be a little simplistic. I think there's more complicated bourbons out there that are worth exploring. Some in that price range, some over, some under. And that argument can be had about anything really. But for me, I think Blanton's is a wonderful place to begin a bourbon journey. It is complex. It is very, very nice for its price point. But is it worth hunting across a couple of states over? I don't think so. If someone's never tried a good bourbon, I would pour this out for them. It'd be one of my options for them because it is an excellent example of a great bourbon. All in all, it's a good bourbon. Totally worth having. It's not the best ever. It's not, by no means is it the worst. But if you ever have an opportunity to try it and you never have before, definitely do so. But don't spend hundreds of dollars. You will be disappointed. So let me know in the comments below, what do you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I crazy? Am I correct? What do you think about Blanton's? Have you had an opportunity to get your hands on a bottle for anything under like $200? I'd love to hear from you, so just let me know. So for our final transition tonight, we are going to be talking about a very, very popular question. Another very popular question, and that would be, what killed the dinosaurs? So most evidence points to this. A thin little line right here in this vial. And this is a line of iridium. And back in the 1980s, this shook the paleontological world. Walter Alvarez was digging in Italy when he noticed a line in the rock, and working with his father, the renowned physicist Luis Alvarez, they searched several points around the world and discovered the same line of iridium at the same time period in multiple deposits. And this is very, very strange because iridium in the Earth's crust is incredibly rare, I mean, extremely rare. And yet, here is this thick line of iridium 65 million years ago across the planet. And they started figuring out that since it's very, very rare on Earth, but it's very, very, very abundant in asteroids and meteors and comets, that perhaps something brought all this iridium to Earth 65 million years ago, and after that line, there are no more dinosaurs. So this asteroid or comet that they actually finally discovered the crash site of was essentially the size of the island of Manhattan in New York. And as it fell through the atmosphere, it struck the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico with a force of about 10 billion Hiroshima bombs, blowing a crater 110 miles wide. And this crater is called Chicxulub crater. And the impact, I'm sorry, that's wrong. I can't pronounce that. But if you know yeah, I'm sorry. I don't do Spanish well. I learned German. Not as useful as you might think it is. Anyway, so the impact force of this meteor built mountains instantaneously. It took the surface of the Earth in North America and whipped it like a blanket on a bed. Entire plateaus shifted, rose in the air, and crashed down. Large animals like Triceratops, Brontosaurus, and T-Rex were thrown dozens of meters into the air to come crashing down. The sky was filled with burning debris, and pterosaurs' wings were burnt off of their bodies. This was a cataclysm beyond anything the Earth has ever seen in a single instant. Most mass extinctions in history took hundreds of thousands of years to come to a head and everything dies. This was instantaneous. It took years, just a few years, and dinosaurs were at that point practically extinct. It darkened the Earth. The temperatures dropped and the Earth nearly died out, except for us. Our little mammal ancestors survived, living in little holes in what now is modern day birds. They're the only dinosaurs that actually exist, that actually survived the KT extinction. This was an absolute fireball that crashed into the planet. Something that is very unlikely to ever happen again, but leaves behind a relic and a grand mystery of what happened. Now, there's a lot of new information coming out that the asteroid was the final straw that broke the dinosaurs' back. And that's probably true. There was a large herbivore crisis about 20,000, 20,000 years earlier, and the dinosaurs were recovering from that. There were some growth issues about their size, food access, so they were coming to a point where dinosaurs had to begin to evolve again. And if it weren't for this, they would have. There's no two ways about it. Dinosaurs would have continued to survive, most likely, past this point, but this completely obliterated them. And the only part that we realized that something else happened was this, someone noticing a small band of iridium and thought, that shouldn't be there, and began asking the questions of why is it? What does it mean? What could this mean? And that's the scientific method. And even when you notice something very, very small, oftentimes it can lead to very great discoveries. So two men, a father and son, the Alvarezes, basically answer the question of what killed the dinosaurs. And now it's completely accepted as absolute fact, and most evidence still supports it. Every once in a while you'll find somebody who's a little crazy and thinking that, they all went gay and they stopped reproducing and things like that. There's a lot of crazy hypotheses out there. Don't listen to them. Look at the science. So tonight we've answered a few questions. We've answered what happened to the dinosaurs, what happened when they died. We've answered the question of what is Blanton's all about? And I hope that you've liked our answers. If you did or didn't, let us know in the comments. We've started up a Facebook page, Bourbon and Bones. link in the description below. We've started an Instagram page as well. So go ahead and follow us there. We like to interact with our fans. And so always remember, share a bourbon with someone. Good night.